everyone world over, all our brothers and sisters, those are joining from different countries, from different continents, in different time zone, in different conditions. I hope you're taking care of your health and you're fine. World is getting to a better forum now, and I think things are getting better. But at the same time, there are some difficult, disturbing news from certain places. So we pray to Almighty, everything should be fine. My younger brother out of London, and I learned that the entire thing has been shut down for 1 month. So everybody should take care of themselves the best possible way because this corona is very mischievous. It never, nobody knows from which door it comes and from which direction it comes. So take care of yourself the best possible way. We have come a long way, and year 2020 is getting nearly to the end. Today is 24th. Exactly after 1 week will be again Thursday, and that will be the last day of 2020. And ladies and gentlemen, we have come a very long way. Today is the 480th webinar, and we take a pleasure to share with all of you that we will be completing with the next 4 days 500 webinars. Now, making education relevant when we talk about आइए शिक्षा को प्रासंगिक बनाएं, but which way? It's a global confluence of intellectuals. The new education policy 2020, which has been given by the government of India on 29th of July. In that, one of the very important segment which we have got is empowering teachers, critical and creative thinking in classrooms. So today we have got a very distinguished speaker. We have got a very distinguished guest. She had been very kind to come earlier as well on number of occasions. If you see on the YouTube, you'll be able to see Madam Veena Raizada. She's the academic advisor, Next Education Private Limited. She carries a long experience and she has got lots of expertise and she has given a lot of vision to all of us. And today, when people are joining us from very prestigious organizations from world over, we extend you a very warm welcome. Pleasure to have all of you. And at the same time, let me roll in and extend a very warm welcome to Madam Veena Raizada, Academic Advisor. International Chamber for Service Industry, the NRIs, corporate and the government interface, making education relevant is the agenda. We are organizing almost 26 webinars per week, and there's a lot to go. And immediately after this, we have got one more webinar from Sweden and United States together. Today, a lot of people are watching from world over. I'm so grateful to all of them from very prestigious organization. People are a part of this journey. Thank you very much for coming and being a part of it. And with the permission of Madam Veena Raizada ji, I will keep posting lots of in chat box during your presentation with your permission. So kindly be kind. Don't consider I am not listening to you. I will be listening to you very carefully. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have got from morning 9 till evening 9, we have got 12 hours non-stop complimentary beaming. And I'm so very happy. I'm so very happy that during this last 9 months, we have got a global family together with all of us. This is the next program, which will be coming live from Sweden as well as from the USA. And that is going to be today live on GS Motivator after this program. And I would request Veena ma'am to inform all her groups. They should come for this program and they should come for next program as well. And today in this program, we have got critical thinking, creative thinking, and lots of packaging. Very important subject of Veena Raizada ma'am. But at the same time, the next program is the role of Gurukul education system in the rise of India. Now, this I have been asked, by a specific group, and that's why we are hosting this as a very special webinar this evening. And this will be beaming world over like the present program of Madam Veena Raizada. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is the new milestone for you, a new journey for you. future of education. ICSI in 2021 will be focusing on future of education. What will be education in future? All futuristic, all basically prediction for future. We will be working on that, and that will be blended with the skills and entrepreneurship. We will not focus on employment. We will focus on entrepreneurship, startup, skills development, and everything related to with empowering education. It will be on the YouTube live GS Motivator. I hope you enjoy that milestone. Wonderful. Right over there at the road. And let me give you the panoramic view. On the left-hand side of the road, you have got greenery. You need plantation, you need cultivation, you need greenery, and you need for the survival of the humanity. What do we need? Basically, what we need is prakriti. And what we need is cultivation. That part is very important. So what I wish to share with all of you, tomorrow is 25th, then will be 26th, and then will be 27th. So Dr. Sharma, what is so special about it? We all know that tomorrow is 25th, and then is 26th, and then 27th. Okay, great. There's something very special. At 12:30 in the afternoon on 25th, 26th, and 27th December, we will bring a curtain raiser to you that what we are going to have on 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st of December. Those of us who are from the education, those are from the education ecosystem, those want to understand what will be the future of education, how will be 2021 and onwards. So 28th of December at 12:30 in the afternoon, we will be covering school education. 29th December, we will be covering higher education. 30th of December, we will be covering skills and competencies, all 37 sector skill councils of India. And 31st December is going to be the golden triangle: education, skills, and MSME entrepreneurship and startups. We will enter to the new year after empowering the entire global humanity the best possible way from our side. So don't forget to join us tomorrow, day after day after, for 3 days as a curtain raiser at 12:30 in the afternoon. And then on 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, very specific agendas where you will come to know. 28th, basically on school education, 29th, higher education, 30th, skills and competencies, 31st, MSME, that is startup and everything related to that. So ladies and gentlemen, whatsoever human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Let's come together for making world a better place, making education relevant. This particular chamber, now I'm so proud and I'm so happy to share with all of you, we are getting to the Guinness Book of Records. It will be the first chamber in the entire global fraternity during pandemic covering 500 webinars, only empowering education with 5,000 educators. So before we move on to that, join me in extending a very hearty welcome this evening to Madam Veena Raizada ji. Hearty welcome. Pleasure to have you, ma'am.
Thank
And
you so
let's
much,
go
Dr.
ahead with you and let's address to the global fraternity. NEP 2020, people, those are joining from abroad, NEP's new education policy and National Education Policy 2020 of India, which is given on 29th of July at 4 p.m. by the Government of India. And today, Madam is going to talk to all of us, empowering teachers for what? Critical and creative thinking. With these words, Madam Veena Raizada ji.
Thank you, Dr. Gulshan Sharma. It is always a pleasure to be with you on your platform, and blessed I feel to share my experiences of my professional journey. And I hope so, as you desire me to do it as a quick package of whatever I have planned. So let's hope that we will go ahead with that. Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone whosoever has joined from all over the globe. I am privileged to share my experiences with all of you. Thank you so much. So here I am to share how exactly the teachers can be empowered by different subjects that they are teaching and planning and students are learning. The critical thinking and creativity in classrooms. That's something we call as critical pedagogy. Now, critical pedagogy is part of NEP 2020, as good Dr. Sharma just now explained to you that we have just introduced it in the month of July 2020. And 4 basic skills that 21st century education focuses upon is creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. Apart from this, the new skills that all around have been added is cultural diversity also is emerging as a very important skill. Then care for Mother Earth is also emerging as an important skill. And along with that, curiosity. How do we arouse the curiosity of our learners to be willing learners? Learning how to learn, learning how to think, not what to think. So how do we train our learners to be part of this new emerging skills, and how teachers could be empowered to ensure that by their curriculum, through their teaching plans, they are delivering the honing and enhancing of these skills in the classroom. So the flow of the session, what I wish to share with all of you is, what is critical thinking? Are we using critical thinking in our daily lives? And what is the difference between, because we end up confusing between creative thinking and critical thinking. Why do we need these kinds of skills? How does it help us? And how can we incorporate creativity and critical thinking, CTs for critical thinking skills, in our learning curriculum? Now, curricular pedagogy is something that all teachers need to remember this word and Google it for learning further, that how it illuminates the classroom learning, embodies selective values, is entangled with relations of power, entails judgments about what knowledge counts. So how critical pedagogy is emerging as a new pedagogy of teaching learning process. This is for every teacher to learn about. Now, do we really use critical thinking as in our daily lives? How do we know that we are doing that? So for that, I'm sharing with you certain situations where we are actually using critical thinking. Now, if you look at the first situation, what we are doing is when we make choices. What are we doing when we make choices? When we have a simple activity which the teachers can do in the classroom is whether you want this or you want that. Like a simple choice, a child wants to eat a normal food at home, or he wants to order something from Pizza Hut. How do we make choices of whether I want to read a book or I want to watch a movie? Then how do I make a choice of what kind of movie I want to see, whether I want to see a English movie or Hindi movie? And if I choose to English movie, what kind of movie? Will it be a horror movie? Will it be a tragedy movie? Will it be a romantic movie? Will it be something different, adventurous movie? So how do we make these choices? Those choices are based upon what are the previous experiences that we have, what is the previous knowledge that we have. So in order to make any choice, we need to have previous knowledge, prior knowledge. That is how we are able to make the right kind of choices. So we are using this critical thinking process in our day-to-day lives by choosing, by making the right choices as per our thought processes, as per our perspectives, that how we should be responding to a situation. Next one. So when we compare and contrast, how do we check the similarities? If I show you one bottle like this and show you another jar, so how will you talk about the various similarities that two objects in my hand are having? How would you compare, contrast, that then find out the differences between these two? So how do we make our children aware of finding out the similarities and differences? Now, if you are seeing the, in my hand, one is a bottle and one is a jar. So how many similarities you can think about? Keep writing in the chat box. And apart from similarities, how many differences you can find out between these two objects that I'm showing it to you. You could use in the class technology also by showing visual thinking strategies. You can use. So we have to move away from that stuff of rote learning. If I ask you that, what is the name of the animal that comes to your mind the moment I say the word D? Please write in the chat box. Now, Gulshan Sharma sir is all watching it out. So I'm sure everyone comes out with the word thought that D stands for dog. Now, if I ask you a simple word that A stands for what? The first thought that comes to our mind is apple. We have all grown through structured learning processes, and it is time for us to move away from that rote learning to a learning where children are participating, where children are having inquiry-based approach, exploratory approach. Now, if I ask you, what is the color of an apple? You might be writing red or even green apples or even yellow. But one of the child in the classroom said that apple is white. Now, many of us might be wondering, how does a child say it is white? The child says, if you cut it open and then see the color is white. The children are maybe exploring the things, but by our structured method of learning, we are conditioning them. So let's move away from that conditioning. Let's move away from structured learning, rote learning, to exploratory learning. Next one is, when we do cause and effect analysis, when we lead to finding out a solution, problem solving, simple questions like, when I go to the mountains, why it is difficult to boil the potatoes? What is the variation of pressure and temperature? How do we really relate the two quantities? How is the variation of pressure affecting the boiling of potatoes or cooking of the food? So simple questions which are related to the conceptual things are talking of the applications. We have to move from that lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy of knowledge, understanding, to application, to analysis, to synthesis, and to creation. So we have to change our lesson plans in such a way that whatever subject we might be doing, we are incorporating the opportunities for exploration, for doing some kind of research work, for doing some communication, for some skills, as I will talk of certain subjects during the presentation of mine. Next one is, when we question the decision, conclusion, or inference. Recently, one of my students was doing the survey on effectiveness of online teaching. The moment she shared the result with me, I just asked her, how many participants were there? Who all were they from different area? Were they from different age groups? Were they all stakeholders in the education sector? Then only you can make a generalized situation. So when we get a conclusion or decision or inference, how are we questioning that validity of that with various kinds of questions that the person may be able to justify that this is what I have done. So we need to inculcate the spirit of asking questions. Asking the right question is more important than finding out the right answers. Therefore, encourage students to ask questions, to explore questions. Then next one is, when we examine the information by asking questions, IBA is inquiry-based approach. It is almost talking of the scientific attitude, scientific temper, that how do you observe a phenomena? How do you take the statistical data and information about that? How do you represent those information in the form of tabular form, bar graphs, or pie graphs? How do you find out the statistical correlations between the various parameters that you have taken? And how do you finally interpret and get a conclusion? And then, does that fit into the hypothesis that we started with? How do you validate, you test it, and re-examine the process and take the feedback? Next one is when we look at pros and cons of a choice. These are high stake decisions, and this is almost like an analytic tool. When we list what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of taking a call on that. So when we are looking at the pros and cons of a choice to make a decision, again, we are using critical thinking in our daily lives. So, but when I want to write down the list of pros and cons, I am supposed to be aware of what situation I am in and from what is my background, what is my reality at the moment, and to which further reality I want to move on. Then only I will be able to write down the pros and cons of it. Is almost like listing out. So it is just like folding a paper into two halves by folding it in the center, and on one column you write down pros and the other side you write down cons, and then you weigh the possibilities of advantages and disadvantages so that you can make a call of joining that or saying yes to that or no to that, depending upon what are the positive points and what are the disadvantages of that. Again, this is uses of critical thinking in our daily lives. Then next one is when we develop a perspective, when we have to explore a fact and opinion or beliefs. We have all grown up knowing that owls cannot see during the daytime. But when you go to National Geographic Channel and National Geographic website, you will read it about that how they have a particular kind of binocular vision, how they have a capacity of turning their neck by a certain amount of degrees, so that, and how the retina of their eyes is capable of reducing the aperture so that they are focusing on whatever they want to see. So that is how we are using critical thinking in our day-to-day lives. But how do we incorporate in our curriculum? That is a challenge for all my teacher fraternity, and that's where probably I would like to share. Certain things that we are growing up in the current science, based on the neuroscience, we are already talking about the left brain and the right brain. So if biology of human brain says that left side of the brain is logical, so all kinds of rational thinking, all kinds of organization, all kinds of planning, processing, analysis, that is the left side of the brain. And the right brain is always talking about the creativity, the passion, the music, imagination, thinking, writing, creative writing. There could be like performing arts, music and drama, and being a painter is also the right side of the brain. So how is your brain functioning? We make use of both sides of the brain, but which is part is dominant in our thought process, in our actions, in our day-to-day responses to the situations in which we become that kind of person, that kind of human being. And it is very, very important to understand that when we talk about the left side of the brain, we are talking first into the small pieces and then we look at the big picture. Whereas when you look at the right side, we are talking of the big picture, then we start fitting into it. So I imagine that I will make this kind of painting and then I start putting everything step by step into that. So this is how our left side brain and right side brain works upon that. Now this story probably everybody, the old fables that we have grown up with, this stories goes back to the times when I used to visit my hometown Himachal Pradesh during summer vacation, and how my grandparents will be end up telling stories that made so much of relevance. Now this story is about a farmer who had a lion and a goat and a sack of grass, and he wanted to cross the river. He had a small boat, and the condition was that boat could carry only 2 persons at one time. So how would he cross, ensuring that lion doesn't end up eating the goat or goat doesn't end up eating the grass? Now, when you have to make this kind of choice and finally look at what the farmer ends up doing, what the poor man ends up doing, how many rounds will he make? So please keep writing in the chat box that how will he cross the river and what kind of decisions he would make. That is critical thinking. So when we grow up listening to the stories, listening to the old fables, Panchtantra tales, Aesop's fables, we are almost talking about critical thinking, problem solving skills. But the question is, how do I put it to my child? How do I narrate that story? How do I ask in between the questions so that the child is thinking over while listening to the story? Now, I'm sure you must be knowing all the answers for that, because this is a very common story everywhere. Okay. So how he goes from one edge of the river to the other side. Please write down your answers, and Dr. Gulshan Sharma must be watching out the answers which the people are writing out. Let me give you one hint that he'll be making 4 rounds. Now, which will be those 4 rounds? Just plan it out and check it out. Now, critical analysis of this learning outcomes of this story. Now, what have we learned out of this? Number 1, the language, the metaphors that have been used. The poor farmer with lion, goat, and bundle of grass is a metaphor for the problems we human beings face throughout the world every day. And what will be the situations of crisis? It will be a crisis when the lion ends up eating goat. And if goat ends up eating the grass, it will be a messed up situation. And that is how the situations in which we are in our day-to-day lives, sometimes we end up into a crisis because the kind of decisions, kind of thought processes, kind of choices that we make, that leads to crisis. And sometimes we are in such a messed up situation that we are unable to take a call of clarity. So clarity of thoughts, the basis of taking a call for a particular kind of choice, that is what determines the quality of life that we are in. So what are the life skills that how do we focus on the situation in which we are? How do we analyze that? How do we prioritize and take judicious actions? This is critical analysis of the situations, day-to-day problems that we are in. Then what are the learning outcome? It is almost the process, the steps of problem solving process. How do you recognize the crisis well on time? How do we identify? Everybody knows when the coronavirus came up, how did different governments take up the decision to put the lockdown situations, and when to do it, how to do it, for how long to do it? That were the major decisions the people had taken. Then how do we prioritize the issues of concern? How do I analyze the problem, the size of the problem? How will it impact? How many people would be impacted? How many other connected areas would be affected? So how do I analyze the problem before I take the call? Then how do I use logical intelligence to think of options? So how do I generate ideas to solve this kind of situation? Then how do I make right choices, that I evaluate the solution, that if I do this, this is what is going to happen. If I do this, this might happen. So how do I have the pros and cons of a solution that I want to implement? Then finally, how do I act wisely, implement and assess? And that is not the end all, because after that, I must review, redesign and re-examine. So it's a question of how do you take a feedback? How do you have a reflective process of your own actions? So when you are teaching in the class, the students are learning, how do you have reflective learning? How do you have reciprocal learning in order to understand whether the children have learned or not? So look into the concept of reflective learning, reflective teaching, both for the teachers and for the student. So reciprocal teaching is another very important concept where children could be involved, where learners could become as partners in education, where learners themselves are leading the show. So how do we have the process of creating self-learning personas, lifelong learning persons who will continue the process of learning, which is relevant, unlearning, which is redundant, and relearning, whatever is required. So process of learning, unlearning, and relearning continues with the kind of feedback that we get for any kind of solution that we have opted for. So what exactly is critical thinking? Core critical thinking skills are used to make judgments based on quantitative information that we have in variety of contexts. So I can't be using any critical thinking skills if I do not have a previous knowledge, prior information, prior data, that on the basis of which I'm going to take logical decisions. So for teachers to read, for learners to read more and more and to get the whole concept before we really go into logical reasoning of any questions, any answers, that is required. So lot of prior knowledge, lot of understanding, lot of information is required as the basis to take a call of pros and cons, compare and contrast, or inquiry based approach, or reflective feedback. Everything requires a prior knowledge, prior base, on the basis of which you will be using these skills. So good critical thinkers are able to interpret, they are able to analyze, they are able to evaluate, infer, and explain. So how do we make our children what they think and how they come out with their own judgments? So how any one of us as a teacher or a learner is responding to a particular kind of conceptual learning, application learning, that is what probably we need to focus upon. So it is talking about metacognition, thinking beyond thinking, knowing beyond knowing, learning beyond learning. So how do I have extended learning so that children are prepared for the lives and jobs of futures which are so uncertain at the moment? So these are the elements of critical thinking skill. So core critical thinking skills. First skill is interpretation. How do I interpret any result, any information, any knowledge concept that I have learned in the class? Then how do I analyze that situation? Then how do I evaluate the various possibility solutions that are coming up, the outcomes of that analysis? Then how I'm doing the inference of that on the basis of statistical questions that I'm talking about, correlation or mean or median or mode, whatever I'm using. So how do I have an inferential statements about the process that I'm going through? Then how do I explain that this is what is happening on the basis of this? So if I'm talking something related with the mean, the average, so what is the average population or average data indicating? So if I'm talking about correlation, how is one parameter dependent upon the other? What is the influence of one parameter on the other? So identification of parameters on the basis of which you are taking the call, the influence of one on the other, and the corresponding information, knowledge related to that, and understanding of that would be required for core. And then self-regulation. It is always self-directed, self-practice, self-disciplined. That is the crux of core critical thinking skills. Now, it's the 4D framework of critical and creative thinking, and this is what is the Australian curriculum framework from where I have taken this concept, with whom they are following this, and you can check out the website for Australian curriculum, how they have integrated critical and creative thinking into 4 quadrants. Now, those 4 quadrants, each one of them is talking about all the core skills of creativity as well as creative thinking that we have just now discussed. So reflective, if you look at that, reflecting on thinking and processes, this is what I just now talked about. How do you analyze and synthesize and evaluate reasoning and procedures? The 3rd quadrant. How do you generate ideas, possibilities, and actions? The 1st point. And how do you identify, exploring, and organizing information? So what are the steps? So these 4 quadrants are talking about how critical and creative thinking could be incorporated into the curriculum. Let's have the one very important difference between critical thinking and creative thinking. That critical thinking is convergent thinking, that after taking the whole process into consideration, we come to a conclusion. Whereas creative thinking is like a divergent thinking. So we have ideas and ideas and ideas. So critical thinking is convergent thinking, creative thinking is divergent thinking. But they both have to come together in order to enable an individual to have the skills of problem solving, because you can solve a process only when you have ideas, only when you can think of various possibilities, only when you can think about how logically you come down to a conclusion. So this is a combination of critical and creative thinking skills that leads an individual to be a problem solver. And this is what is the need of 21st century education, 21st century learner, 21st century individuals. So this is what I'm showing in the next slide is creative thinking is divergent thinking. When we are talking about the exploring the possibilities, what are the possible things that can happen? And when we are talking about critical thinking, when we judge all the ideas that we have had, when we analyze all of them, and then convergent thinking, deciding what to do. Apart from this, we talk about lateral thinking, Dr. De Bono's 6 thinking hats. Now, lateral thinking is moving from one step to another. But if you see the first hat, which I'm going to use to show it to you, that if you use a blue hat, you will find that blue hat of Dr. De Bono represents the generation of ideas. So it is creative thinking when you generate one idea after the other idea. So this is the blue hat. When you wear it, as per Dr. De Bono, it represents that how many ideas can you generate, how many possible things that we can do. That is divergent thinking, as you can see in this slide, that is exploring the possibilities. The other hats have other meaning. We'll come back to that later. So critical thinking is finally, when you use the black hat, you are talking about the consequences of taking that action that you have decided to be taken. When you use a red hat, you are talking about the emotional connect of the solution that you are going to use. So how, if I open the schools at this moment, the critical decision that we are yet to take, how will it impact the mental, social health, well-being of the parents, of the students who are coming to us? How will I manage? What all things do I need to do in order to ensure that I can run the school? So these are the emotional aspects that you talk about. And when you talk about the white hat, you talk about what are the realities, the facts that are around me, and what actions should I take based on that. And when I talk about yellow hat, I'm talking about the golden sunshine, that how the things are going to benefit all around. And when I talk about green hat, I'm talking about the possible alternatives. So creative thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, lateral thinking, they can all be. So all teachers could be doing this activity of 6 thinking hats in the classroom by dividing the class into 6 groups. Each one of them given one particular role. Each one of them has a particular assignment. And then we come back to convergent thinking to take a call on what should I do. So how do I integrate in the curriculum? And I've tried to take these subjects which people think are most difficult, even though I've put in a lot of effort to associate them. So I like to begin with critical thinking in geography. Now, when we think of, I've taken the theme landforms. Now, when we do it as a structured teaching, how we have grown, what are landform, what are different kinds of landform, how many does India have, how many does world have? So we know the name, we know the places, we know everything. It's more like information that we have got it. So how to turn this activity into an activity that develops creativity as well as critical thinking skills. So I would like to, in the next few slides, I would like to demonstrate that. And this is where I want all my teachers to apply this kind of technique, not only in geography, but every other subject. So how can you go over on this theme? So when I use a blank map of India, I can use different levels of Bloom's taxonomy, checking their knowledge by saying that where is Thar Desert, put it there. Where is Himalayan range? Put it there. Where is Satpura range? Where are Ghats? All kinds of stuff I keep on asking. That is knowledge. Does the children know it? So there are certain things which are definitely forming the base on the basis of which we move ahead. Now, understanding. Next question. Why do you think the population is less there? Why do you think the airports are at a particular place? Then application part. So when we give this as an activity to the child, why asking? So that now the duty of the teacher, the responsibility of the teacher is to prepare a set of questions for the worksheet to be associated with this kind of activity. And each question, we can go back to the Bloom's taxonomy, verbs at different levels, how they can be used. So it is again the art of framing questions that determines the quality of teaching learning process. So this is one way where we are checking the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. But again, I'm repeating, the way we make questions, that makes a difference. So how do I frame those questions? That is what will determine the quality of learning process. Now, how can this be changed to the other level when I can give them a map like this? When I've shown them there, so I can now frame a different set of questions that will be fitting into this kind of Indian map that has been given to the students. So everything has been given as the part of landforms. Now, what kind of questions you can ask, that is your competency of doing critical pedagogy in the classroom. That is your competency. So learn, practice, prepare the type of questions that will help the children to think critically, explore, explain, exchange the ideas, and then express them. So art of framing questions is something that every teacher needs to empower herself. So keep on looking at the Bloom's taxonomy, the different verbs, and keep on framing the different kinds of questions. Let me ask you, this question was in fact in the NCF 2005. If the answer is 3, what kind of questions can you ask the students? Please keep writing in the chat box. Sir is looking at that, so he will keep telling me. So if the answer is to be 3, what kind of possibility? I'm sure the very first kind of question we will write is some addition number or some subtraction number or some multiplication or some division. So these are all mathematical formulas. Can we have a question in the form of a story? Can we have the question in the form of some scenario? Can we have a question where the child has to explore this possibility that how the answer would be 3? So how do you frame questions based on different strategies? That is required for developing and honing and enhancing the skills in the children. So learn that, go for it, keep on exploring, keep on Googling, keep on creating those kinds of worksheets for you. Now, how do you nurture critical thinking in this geography theme of landforms? The exploratory question that we will put for the children is, what is the impact of landforms on population, industrial setups, and economy of the area? So I'm presuming that I have taught that concept to the children. So this is a question now I have set it up for them. That what are the parameters which are affected by the different kinds of landforms? So how do you frame that exploratory question is another art which teacher needs to focus upon. So I have made this question, what is the impact of landforms on population of an area? What kind of industries will be there? And what is the economy of that? So what is starting prompt? So now this is creative thinking skills. How do I incorporate that? So I tell the children, create a country of your dreams and put the various landforms wherever you want to put, mountain, valleys, rivers, plains, deserts, wherever ghats, wherever you want to put, just put down. So child is given that imagination possibility, that creative option, and that divergent thinking option that he can draw a country. We are not confining it to any particular, that he can make a new one that you want, that my country of dreams would look like that. So that is now creative thinking skills come into the play in geography subject. So once the child has made that placement of mountains, valleys, rivers, plains, and different landforms on his map, and he has created a boundary imagination of his dream country. Now the next question, the critical thinking questions that come is, spot out the places of various industrial setups that provide products of our, where would you plant them and why? So after having made all those landforms, how would the child decide that where would the industries be set up? So he would learn that what are the conditions to set up a particular kind of industry? What are the parameters that are essential for the prospering of that industry? Because industrial setups are necessary for better living. So how do I put that critical thinking question? Because you have made a country, you have put the various landforms of your choice, and you have your own country now. Now, because you want to have the population there, now you want to have the human beings out to be there. Therefore, there have to be support, life supporting things also there. So where will you put the industrial setups and why would you put them there? So child now has to think about that, what kind of industry can be set up where and how will it actually flourish? Next kind of questions. Where do you think agricultural farming will be planned and it will be growing well? So how will children identify that what are the fundamental requirements, essential requirements for agricultural farming? And in that imagination or my dream country, I have put all the landforms, but where will I put the agricultural farming possibilities? That is another critical thinking skill questions. Now, when the population, the human beings would come there, they would need to possibility of trade and travel. What? So where would you put the airports? So in that dream country, you have to identify the places where you can plan the airports. So in order to fix those places, he will have to understand what are the requirements for any place to be identified as an airport plan. Then very investigative question. Do you think some areas would become overpopulated? You have to justify your choices. If I say some particular area in my dream country would become overpopulated, so I have to justify why I am saying that. So logical reasoning and justification, another part of 21st century skills that comes into play. Now the most important question, boundaries and agreements. Where do you think the boundaries agreement would be so easier? And do you think there would be some difficult areas? So how I am through this landform topic in geography, teaching the students creative and critical thinking skills. I hope Dr. Sharma, you are getting some answers. Hello.
Haji ma'am, Haji, please go ahead.
Okay, now I'm talking about critical thinking in history.
I'm busy with overseas guests, please.
Critical thinking in history, I have taken the topic of World War I and World War II. Now, how I am going to use those critical thinking skills in that? So there is a small video. I hope I'll be able to play that.
There is no audio. There is no audio. Ma'am, there is no audio.
Ji, sir.
There is no audio. Audio nahi hai, audio.
Okay, sir. Let me see if I can share. Sir, let me see if I can play the other window of that.
आप YouTube से सीधा भी चला सकते हैं.
सर मैं वही देख रही हूँ चलाने के लिए. So I am just seeing at that what am I sharing. So let me play this. Is it visible, sir?
No, the thing is अभी तो आपकी presentation visible है. if you want to play any video from YouTube.
Just a minute, sir.
If you want to play any video from YouTube, then
I'm sharing, sir. I'm sharing. Just a minute. I think now it is visible.
No.
I have taken a new window.
No, it's your video only, ma'am. It's only your video. That means your presentation.
You're not able to see the screen, sir?
No, ma'am, no. On screen, your presentation was coming, ma'am. Critical thinking.
I'm trying to share the new screen and then still it is not showing. So now?
Now it has come. New screen has come.
New screen has come. So
Yeah.
I'll play this video right from the beginning.
It has gone back to your 5 critical thinking strategies for any class. Now the man has come, but the
Yes.
audio is not there. Increase the volume. No. Ma'am, on the YouTube, down below, there are 2 columns.
Sir, I have set the maximum volume.
Okay. No, actually. Anyway, you can explain. No worries. Sometime because these are technical things, no problems. So compare, explain similarities. Just contrast. Explain differences. Analyze, break into parts.
Yes, sir, it is coming that only.
Anji. His audio is not there.
So the 5 strategies are compare, contrast, analyze, categorize, and evaluate. So when we talk about So coming back to my presentation.
Yeah, ma'am.
So this is the 5 strategies that we talk about is when we talk about compare. So we find out the similarities. When we talk about contrast, we find out the differences. When we find out, when we do analysis, we find out what all happened in that. When we categorize, we put them into different categories. And finally, we evaluate. So what happened, the net result of that, right? So we'll go to the next one. Just a minute. So next, I'm taking the subject basketball as like how do you have critical thinking via sports and physical education? Because NEP 2020 talks about integration of sports and arts into the curriculum. So how we are going to develop critical thinking via sports in I've taken the sport. You can take any sport. I've taken particularly the basketball. The most very prominent player, Michael Jordan, his quote prepares us for learning from failures. I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So how do we teach our children to the sayings and quotes of these prominent players that it is okay to be failing, but the most important thing is what do you learn from those failures? Now, how do I use this particular sport as a critical thinking skill? So what kind of questions? Again, the whole process is dependent upon what kind of questions do I create. Why are basketball players usually tall? Do you think short players cannot be the basketball players? So how do I have the parameters that influence the shooting from a distance, from the D circle of a basketball? So how does the height of a basketball player determines that whether you can be part of a team or not? So next one, how can anyone be a great basketball player? So what are the skills that you need to be great basketball players? Then what advice would you give to someone who's wanting to play basketball? Learning and knowing how to play basketball doesn't qualify you to be the part of a basketball team that may be playing at district, state, or national or international levels. Because at every level, the skills required are different. But how do I make the children explore these possibilities through my questions? Then, which factors influence the selection of an individual as a basketball team player? Does the height of the pole make a difference? Does the distance from which you are shooting make a difference? Is the quality of your dribbling that makes a difference? Is your spontaneity of passing on the basketball to others makes a difference? So what are the kinds of skills that you need to have? So how do I make children to be aware of the skills that are particularly required for that particular sport? Now, the most important thing that doesn't happen only in one particular sport, but it happens almost everywhere. Why there is violence of the rules on the court or on the field? So how do we teach our children accepting the judgments, having the patience to listen to the decision of the umpires, and then act accordingly? So these are certain skills which are also known as life skills: patience, persistence, perseverance, to be a good person who is competent. When we talk about competency-based education, it is not only knowledge that counts, but skills and your abilities. So it's a combination of knowledge, skills, and abilities that goes for making you a competence. Therefore, as teachers, when we talk about competency-based education, I have to focus not only on knowledge, but also honing the subject-specific skills along with the abilities, the capabilities, the innate potential of an individual to ensure that. How Howard Gardner talks about the 9 multiple intelligences, the 9 kinds of human natures that person can have. So how can I identify and hone the skills of each individual? So learner-centered education, learners as partners of education, focusing on learner-centered curriculum, focusing on reciprocal teaching where learners become teachers, focusing on making learners as partners in planning and delivering the curriculum. That would make learners a part of learning as an enthusiastic learner, as a learner who wants to keep learning, thinking, because that is how we can keep the children motivated. And as well as the parents' partnership in education also becomes very prominent when you have their children participating. The enthusiasm of the parent is also equally high. Now, something that we talk about creativity is music, and by musical behaviors. Again, I will not be, I think, pointless playing the video because sound effects are not. But however, you can, I'll just leave the link with you. Creativity, thinking, and music education. This is encouraging students to make aesthetic decisions. This is a book by this person, Peter R. Webster, and there is a complete blog of his who talks about what are the basic things people do about music. Everyone wants to listen to music. So that's most common aspect. How many of us are really composing the music? Very few of them. How many of us are performing? But when we are performing, we see nowadays reproduction of the music which is already existing by improvising upon that. So there are certain moments of improvisation in the existing music. But what originality do I have as a musician? What kind of instrument do I want to learn? What kind of music that I want to learn? Classical, Western, or Carnatic music? What do I want to learn? And what are the questions that make a difference? That knowing only one instrument is not enough. Can you be part of an orchestra? In order to be part of an orchestra, what are the skills required? So how do you look at these questions? What does it take to be an orchestra musician? What competence is required to be an orchestra conductor? Because how the various instruments are being played in sync with each other. How I have to know the rhythm, the count, the proficiency of in sync with the remaining team members, then only an orchestra works. So how can we incorporate creativity and critical thinking skills through music? So I've addressed this critical thinking and creative thinking through these subjects: geography, history, physical education, and music. And science and maths, probably each one of us, we are already talking about investigatory projects or investigative approach to science subjects. So it is easier for us to hone the skills in those subjects. So with this, I would like to close the presentation of today. That most important thing is to make decisions. Whether decision is right or wrong is secondary. You will soon receive the feedback that will help you to progress. And I will conclude with that critical thinking and creative thinking together are required for making a learner or ourselves a problem solver. Logical reasoning, problem solving, and all these skills together are 21st century skills, and we need to inculcate all of them into ourselves as well as into our students. 21st century framework released by the International Commission of Education says about learning to do, learning to know, learning to live together, and learning to be. So the whole process is that learning is the essence of 21st century. So how do we keep learning? How do we keep unlearning? How do we keep relearning what is relevant? And let's hope that we step into 2021 with a lot of enthusiasm via the motivational works of Dr. Gulshan Sharma, which is already announced in the beginning of the session. So we step into that with a lot of enthusiasm, lot of motivation, lot of dreams, and make NEP 2020 as well as education all across relevant and meaningful, and reach out to each and everyone around us. Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for giving me this opportunity to share that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Such a wonderful, innovative, creative, and such a vibrant and a dynamic presentation. I must appreciate that today you had put in extraordinary, brilliant efforts for this presentation. It was wonderful, wonderful. In fact, we enjoyed each and every viewing, and mind mapping has started now. Mind mapping, which you have used over here.
I feel good about that.
Yes, we all will enter to 2021 together. We all will move together. We will learn from each other, and I will keep
unlearning also and relearning also, because I have to learn a lot. I'm the most humble, I personally feel. So thank you very much for sharing your vision, your experience, such a long journey and such a long expertise of yours. I'm going to say hats off to you. And today you are wearing different hats. I'm so happy. you made everybody you made everybody, and somebody who attended one session, they were laughing. They say, ma'am has got a lot of hats. I said, yes, she keeps wearing different hats to different occasions. Thank you, ma'am. We look forward to many more such sessions from your side, and I think we have got another session with you tomorrow evening.
Yes, sir.
Wow, same time.
Same time.
Same time. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to meet this dynamic, very creative, and when she's talking about critical thinking, for yet another powerful session tomorrow evening, 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Wonderful. Until then, thank you very much. God bless.